So firstly, just a bit of background. And everyone says digital is changing marketing. I think that's happened. It has changed marketing. The world of today, it's very different to the world of the past. And there's a few things that are very different about digital, and I thought it's worth talking about them briefly. So firstly, digital is highly empirical. For the most part, digital is highly measurable. It's also forever evolving. It changes every single day. You've really got to keep on your toes. You've got to be learning all the time. It's also very impatient. You know, this quote from one of the guys at Google is literally, you know, people spend microseconds before they make a decision, and if you don't please them in that time, they're out of there. It's also highly promiscuous. People don't have a lot of loyalty online. One click and they're out of there. That changes things quite substantially. Having people sit back on the couch and mindlessly watch the adverts in front of them is part of days gone by. Digital is always also highly empowering. This is a doctored screen grab from Shabanga that went down in Egypt, and how social media drove so much of the communication around that. It was quite amazing and highly empowering. You may not have heard this phrase before, that consumers are now in control. Digital is also extremely global. Businesses today operating in one geography can suddenly find themselves in another geography. But it's also extremely local, and it's about finding the balance in your marketing between the two, pleasing both sets of audiences. That it's exceptionally mobile, and this is going to be a big thing for us in Africa. It's social, as we've talked, a lot of Facebook users. But I think the key thing across all of this is that people talk about digital being a channel, and I think that's bollocks. I think digital is far more than a channel. It pervades through every single part of your life. Digital is like pouring water on a pavement. It just fills in every single crack in your life. You know, how many of you have perhaps used your cell phone on the toilet? And that's the reality, is that you don't take your TV to the bathroom. And that's what makes digital amazing, is that it fills in those gap times in our life. So in looking at how these changes impact marketing, I've got a few thoughts. So here's an interesting thing. So the biggest agencies in 1971 were these guys. You may have heard of some of them. And 20 years ago, the biggest agencies in 1991 were these guys. Yes, it's the same slide. And then something changed. The web happened, and what the web provided was a change in the economics of those businesses. And if you look at the biggest agencies today, there's a few more names on that slide. And it's the change of economics that has allowed certain players to grow faster than others. If you look at the marketing game, or just in my opinion, there are four actors at play. The first one is the big dogs, the big traditional established agencies with massive budgets and massive clients, that slide that I showed you earlier. Then there's the specialists. The guys who've picked a specialization or niche and are going after that in its entirety. Then you've got the new kids on the block, which are the digital agencies. And of course, what would marketing be without the beautiful client? And so those are the four kind of actors in play in the game that we're currently playing. And the client, it's important, I believe, to realize that the client actually only wants one thing. They want one neck to throttle. They don't want to deal with 10 different agencies. They are forced to through this economic change, because the majority of our traditional agencies globally, and by their own admissions, are not digital natives. And so clients have been forced to separate out and to deal with multiple actors to facilitate their marketing needs. But I do fundamentally believe that clients don't want that. And if you look 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, clients were going to one, maybe two agencies to assist them with their marketing. So my first prediction is that digital agencies won't exist in 2020. But I think that the bottom line is the fact that agencies that are not digital will be dead. If digital runs through every single thing that we do, ignoring that component is not going to serve any agency very well. And I think the vast majority of successful agencies have realized this, and you see everyone, including our classical, traditional brethren, are becoming very digitally competent. And if they're not, in 10 years' time, there's no doubt in my mind that they won't be around. So at the moment, we're frenemies. Everyone's trying to kind of please the client while subtly trying to eat all the pie. And I think the reality, however, is that the big dogs and the new kids are on a collision course. So the big dogs have got scale, they've got resources, they've got people, they've got hugely deep client relationships. And so the big guys have the upper hand, there's no doubt about that. And the new kids, we're small, and I'd like to think we're nimble, and we're learning as we go, and the only advantage we have is that we are native to this new world. We are native to this new marketing paradigm. And if we don't leverage that to the absolute maximum, we are going to lose. There's no doubt about it. In 5 to 10 years' time, if we haven't leveraged this, digital agencies will be relegated to being production houses, to being suppliers to the large established agencies who need to get a bit of work done and push it down to essentially becoming a specialist. And being a specialist is quite hard. You've got to be the best. There isn't a lot of room for a lot of specialists. If you want to be a specialist agency, you have to be the best in the niche. So the only thing we've got is our digital nativeness. So I think the big guys, the big dogs, in their direction on the collision course, they will build and mostly buy their digital competencies. And I think the new kids will do the same from the other direction, except they'll mainly build because we can't afford to buy. So who's going to win this battle? Can the immigrant become a native? It is certainly possible. I like this quote from this guy, you may have heard of him. And I like it because it emphasizes how this game is going to be played. It's not about the biggest, the fittest. It's about the business that is most responsive to change. So I have a few thoughts on what the agency of 2020 will look like. So my first posit is that they will work on performance. And at the moment, clients are expecting a risk of maybe 10-20% of fees. That's been driven largely by pressure on budgets, so they need to make sure they get the results, but also the measurability of digital lends itself to this. It's not easy to work on performance. There's many different factors at play, and the reality is that the agency doesn't control all the variables. And so the client has to play their role as well, because it's unfair to an agency to expect them to take a risk if they don't control as many of those variables as possible. We'll never control the whole lot. If a client sells a product and it doesn't work and it gets a massive recall, it's hardly the agency's fault. So to get this right, the agency of 2020 will be driven by data. And if you look at the agency of 10 years ago, positions such as data analyst were relegated to the specialists, to the CRM agencies. These days, agencies without data analysts are, quite frankly, missing a trick. The understanding of numbers and how they affect marketing and how they affect performance is critical. And that's going to be a big change in terms of the skills that agencies need to take on board. I think that agencies will start to look at creativity differently. Creative success is about finding that perfect balance between the technology, the idea, and the aesthetic. The aesthetic driven by a good idea no longer is going to win, unless you really just have a one-channel campaign, which is often the least effective. And the agency that can find that beautiful balance between these three elements will deliver amazing creativity. The agency of 2020, I believe, will understand content better. Because I think, and you would have noticed that how many brands are becoming publishers. The economics around creating content have changed fundamentally. And as brands become publishers, agencies are going to have to walk them through this. So agencies' ability to collect content, to create content, and to publish and communicate that content is going to become an important skill. And it's not a skill that many agencies have at the moment. The way media is being articulated in three kind of buckets: the paid, earned, and owned. And we're very used to seeing the paid side of things, the stuff that you traditionally wrap your advertising around. The earned and the owned is stuff that's kind of always been there. Word of mouth has obviously always been there, but digital has made it easier and much more cost effective for brands to work with. And so you're seeing a shift in focus amongst brands from purely focusing on paid media and wrapping their advertising around someone else's content to owning media, driving word of mouth that ends up earning them amazing attention. This is also an interesting way of looking at it, the difference between reach and control. With paid media, you control it 100%. it's highly controlled, but the reach isn't nearly as much. When you own media, when you own a platform, you've got people interacting with it, creating content, sharing with their friends, setting up races. So the control is slightly less, but the reach can be substantially more. With earned media, reach can be astronomical. Obviously, it can also be bad reach, and we must think about that. And if you look at it over time, I think for me this is the most powerful one, is that paid media is short-term. Earned and owned media, owned media for me provides kind of the ballast or the foundations of earned media. If you don't have that, you're unlikely to generate a lot of consistent word of mouth. But over time, earned media can be extremely powerful. So my next prediction, if you will, is that with technology being the enabler of all this, the agency of 2020 will have a client-facing CTO, or Chief Technology Officer, not only to help the team deliver on that blend of creativity with technology at its heart, but also assisting the client in understanding how digital can help their business. The successful agencies of 2020, I do believe, will be really big, and they will be genuinely 360, which is not coincidentally just like they are today, and just like they were in 1971. Because I come back to the fact that clients want one neck to throttle, and I think we're going through a kind of an interim phase at the moment. The next 3 years, I think, particularly in South Africa, are just going to be phenomenal from a growth perspective in digital. But it's going to start to settle down as that digital growth spend starts to normalize, as digital becomes more accepted in the marketing mix. I think that agencies in the future will do a lot more production in-house. If you look at something like video, the ability to produce video and the costs around producing video have plummeted so substantially in the last 10 years that it's actually now become something that doesn't necessarily need to be outsourced. I think that agencies will start to spread more work globally. In the 21st century, I think that the key things in marketing are about being quick and being remarkable. If you can get those two things right, the rest will kind of take care of itself. But to be quick, you have to have a quick agency. And the reality is agency margins are continually under pressure and have been for kind of 25 years, just hard, and clients expecting more and more and more. There's a lot of pressure on. There's a pressure on to deliver. And I think one of the ways that agencies can facilitate this, and particularly the big successful agencies, will be about spreading the work globally and not just sending stuff off to India, but spreading it out on a group level. Because different time zones, every agency has a rush of work on and then a quiet week or two, and about balancing that workload globally, and technology and the internet facilitates that better than has ever been able to before. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I also think that agencies will start to tap into the crowd more. So you're seeing more use of crowdsourcing, and whilst agencies have got the skills and the personnel to come up with great ideas, I do fundamentally believe that no one is as smart as everyone. And sometimes there's an opportunity to reach out to a mass of people who care about a brand to come up with great ideas. I think that agencies will start to be organized by client and not by discipline. We are trying to arrange ourselves around the client and not around our own personal production needs. In this balance of clients demanding performance, there's a trade-off between risk and margin. The client wants you to take more risk, and they're prepared to give you a bit more margin. But a wise man once said to me that clients and agencies generate intellectual property which they sell to clients at a really poor margin, so clients can take that intellectual property and monetize it at a fantastically higher margin. And I think as agencies are under more pressure to work on risk, and yet they can't control every element of the delivery to customer, they'll end up creating their own products. But ultimately, I think most importantly, agencies of 2020 will still value the big idea above everything. And so, whilst everything is going to change, a lot of it, and indeed the most important thing I think will stay the same, is that a great idea that can get a consumer excited, can make them fall in love with a brand, can make them want to build a long-term relationship with a brand, those ideas are absolutely priceless, and when they come along, every agency will still hold on to it as best they can.